I think most of you have, turned in your homework assignments, right? So if you haven't turned in here, turn it in my mailbox, that's fine. So, yes?
It was just funny because you seem so specific about the 12:30 and now you're like, oh, you can put it in my mailbox.
Oh no, 12:30, but in my mailbox right now, right?
Okay.
So I don't want to delay, but what? Yeah, so when I go back, if it's there, that's good. So if you can run before me, then put it there, that's
I go to the bathroom.
I don't have a TA, so I really can't deal with like late homeworks and stuff, right? So it's especially through this semester. So today I'm going to continue with the audio component, right? There's a lot less for me to talk about in general because it uses a whole bunch of other techniques. Yes.
Which are we in the new? Are we in the first textbook still or the second?
First textbook.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So this. Yeah.
So we're like a day ahead or something.
No, I think I moved it around because audio was supposed to be like in last week. So I had all video and then moved the audio here.
Whatever's online now does match up over here.
Oh, okay, I've been going off the one we got in.
Yeah, I think I
Okay.
changed it on first. Yeah, it encompasses 3 different chapters, right? And I think we should just look at audio because it's there. And I think Chris mentioned that you were interested in audio surveillance and stuff, right?
No, I just said that it is type biometric. They're
Okay.
audio.
Yeah, so figured
It's not really something I'm interested in personally, but
okay.
it is a valid biometric.
Yeah, so I think it's worth looking at, even though like people typically talk about video more than audio in terms of the systems aspects of it, just because it's much more macho. I mean, a lot of stuff happens in video. Audio seems like the simple step brother, right? It's not as bad or as good. One of the good things about audio, one of the bad things about audio is you actually perceive audio much better than the video, right? If you don't have good audio quality, then you actually perceive the whole video audio sequence to be poor, right? So if you look at your DVD or what have you, they tend to have higher quality audio than video. They're a lot more forgiving of video, but you're much less forgiving of video, audio. So that's one of the reasons why you give high priority to audio, even though audio looks like simpler, much whatever. You want to make sure that audio sounds good, right? So all the artifacts we talked about where you miss something, there's like a blockade kind of things. In audio, it doesn't sound good, right? And when you have remember the flower we had where the other side had all the all square blocks kind of stuff. If you have such a kind of things in audio, you either hear it as noise or it's annoying, right? So you want to make sure that the audio is of good quality, right? So the first, like we did with the visual stuff, let's look at from the what we can hear and go from there, right? I think it's my laptop making a I think I'm trying to use the speakers, right? So technically we're supposed to be able to hear from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, right? 20 plus kilohertz. Except your age probably it deteriorates what you can hear, so you probably can't hear a whole bunch of the higher frequency.
Your gender too.
Okay, gender makes it. There's a whole bunch of other reasons, right? One of my clear case when I know that I'm going deaf is how many of you can hear the CRT whine? Like when you have CRT TV or monitor, how many of you can hear the whine?
TV is much more than others.
It used to bother the heck out of me when I was in the 20s, right? Now I can't hear them at all. I'm oblivious to the CRT monitor. If you never could hear it, that's okay too. But if it annoys you when somebody comes on TV that you can hear on the whole house, just wait a little bit and then you can go out of it, right? So this website actually had some audio segments that right. So I'm gonna play. Here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, God. Can you hear that?
I can barely hear hear it.
I can
How
hear
many-
it, it just doesn't bother me.
I cannot hear it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I definitely hear that. It's off now.
But not all of you were like that annoyed by it, right? I mean, some of you seem either kind of okay with it or whatever, right? Actually, this speaker, you can hear it better than you can hear through this speaker.
Yeah, I can hear that.
I can't hear it. Right?
They use it as a teenager repellent, you know?
Yeah, I know, that's when I got the
They started
thing.
using it as a ringtone, so like the teacher couldn't hear them call.
Yeah.
So-
Oh my goodness.
Really?
What?
Yeah.
Wait, just a
Lame.
really
When you
high
do
frequency.
It's like that pretty much. And we're using
If
it
I do the equalizer and all those things, right? Now I can hear it. Now I can hear this noise because you manipulated, you change the bass and those kind of stuff, right? They're essentially creating noise where didn't exist to make it hear and stuff, right? So Bose speakers they do a lot of this. They know that the typical people where they are, what they can hear and stuff. So they kind of manipulate these things to make it sound good. Sounding good is what some of the things that we talked about what we can hear and so on. Sounding good does not necessarily mean that it's good speakers and it's doing something. It's just manipulating those things to make it hear. So for example, if you do this little equalizer and change the mid frequencies, I can hear it. So I'm going to say this is a good quality, even though only teenagers are supposed to be annoyed by this stuff, right? And I think I was telling you, it's kind of unfortunate because when you really have money to buy really good speakers, you can't hear them well. When you're really poor college student or whatever, you can hear all the sounds, but you can't afford good speakers.
Which is why old people need to buy us good speakers.
Exactly.
Why good speakers?
For us.
Oh.
I mean, I
So
wasn't
you should
opposed.
donate yours.
You
I think
wanna
it's
donate.
the
Well,
suggestion.
my kid is probably enjoying it a lot more, right? He's probably like, oh yeah, I can hear all the sound. I'm like, I just hear like just the averaging. Yeah. So actually, the website has like different frequencies. Like if you go to the page, you can actually see the pure tones at different frequencies. I think I can hear like 15, 16, something like that. So if you go to the page, you can see how far you can hear, right? So beyond that, this graph tells you how our ear tends to work for the normal younger people who got much more affected by this. Right? So essentially, the x-axis is the frequency in log scale, and y-axis is the sound level, right? So dB defines how loud things are, and this is how much you hear it, right? Like the different graphs are like how much you hear it. Or did I say the opposite? No. So x-axis is how much the sound is, and y-axis is how much you hear it as. Okay. The graphs are for different volumes. If I create a volume, how much do you hear it, right? So, for example, this blue line says that this blue line is actually for 10 dB. So if I create a 10 dB, how much you hear it is actually in the y-axis, right? So for this particular frequency, like 4 to 5,000, even though I create 10 dB worth of noise, I'm all confused now.
The numbers on the lines of the graph say the volume that it actually is, while the lines itself tell you at which frequency, what the intensity of the noise is.
So what I was going to say is, even if you see 2 dB here, you actually perceive it as 10 dB at these frequencies, right? Even a small volume, actually you hear it as a pretty loud noise at around the 4,000 range, which is where the human voice is, right? Whereas at low frequencies, you have to create a lot more volume for you to hear that. So you think it's 10 dB, even though I have to create 60 or 70 dB to make you hear that, right? I got confused on like how you need the graph, but essentially what it says is like, if you hear it as 10 dB, right? I have to create 70 dB worth of noise at this frequency for you to hear it. So this is usually the bass component, and this is the high frequency component. So on both these stuff, I have to practically crank up the volume pretty high for you to notice sound. Whereas in the human speech range, even though I only create 2 dB, you notice it as 10 dB difference. Right? Does that make sense? That's explanation, but I got tracked on the graph. Okay. Essentially, we are tuned to hear voice, right? We are tuned to hear voices much more than we can the lower frequency and the higher frequency, right? So even though I'm going deaf at the high frequency, I'm not going deaf on the range that you actually hear, right? So, and we use these things like we did before, right? There are other aspects of the human audio system. One is that lower frequency masks higher frequency. So if I have two noises, one is of lower frequency, one is of a higher frequency, right? I only hear the lower frequency. I can't hear the higher frequency component while the lower frequency is there, right? So that helps us if somebody is talking and there's a higher frequency stuff in the back, there's a whistle or something in the back, right? You're able to hear the person talking and not the surroundings, right? So that's a good thing, right? Because if you don't do that, then if you hear all the sounds equal, then when there's a lot of people talking, you barely can hear anything because there's so much noise. But the human ear can differentiate and latch on to one noise and then hold on to it. And similarly, louder sound masks the weaker sound. So if you're near me and you're talking, you can't hear the background noise, right? You use those for the encoding stuff. So you can get rid of. So there's a loud low frequency noise and a loud high frequency noise. You get rid of the high frequency noise because you can't hear it anyway, right? And there's also a hysteresis. There's a delay effect. So if you hear the low frequency noise and then the low frequency goes away, right? For a little bit, you can't hear the other frequencies because you're still seeing the same thing, right? It's similar to if I came here and then looked at the screen, then I probably can't see any of you for a few seconds. And it's true that the other way does not happen. The higher frequency does not match the lower frequency. So if you have the same volume, higher and lower, higher frequency does not block the lower frequency. And within the band, let's say the 100 to 10,000 hertz or something that you can hear, we have like this critical band, right? We cannot tell the difference between any frequency on the critical band. So for example, at the lower frequency, it's 100 hertz, which means that if I have a sound which is at 100 hertz and 120 hertz, you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between these two because they all form under the critical band. The critical band keeps going up as you go at higher frequency. So the higher frequency, it actually goes to 6550 hertz. What that means is at your treble end, right? You can't tell the difference for a whole range of noise. So you can't tell the difference between something which is 15,000 and all the way to 20,000. You can't tell the difference in two different sounds. And these are aspects that you can use. So depending on what frequency you send, right? I don't know much about the audio, the tonal, and all those things. How many of you are music players? Do you have any kind of music background? If you do, then the C major, C minor, and all those things are the ones which come here, right? So depending on what harmonics you have, you can hear bass when nothing exists, right? And speaker manufacturers use these things. So if you buy your consumer grade equipment, you have this phantom surround sound and phantom these things, right? Essentially, if you set the right set of frequencies, then you hear sound when the actual speaker is not getting it, but you just hear it.
So can you get a lower frequency than what speakers can generally produce with that? Like, can you get a perceived lower frequency in your bass?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you can hear a perceived lower bass than what the speaker is producing. Yeah, you can't hear lower than what your ear is tuned to hear, but you can make your speakers look like it's producing bass where it's not really producing. Right? Yeah, you can play these tricks to make it sound whatever. And the other thing is you can hear loudness better than the fidelity. So most of the speakers have, some of the consumer systems have this loudness control. Essentially, it gets the lower frequency up. Right? I'm getting too many emails. So you boost certain frequencies there so that you can hear the stuff. But in reality, like the 100 to 4,000, 5,000 hertz is where most of the audio stuff, most of the human speech is. The other ones are for higher fidelity content that you may or may not be able to hear, and the speaker may or may not be able to produce it, right? The Weber's law, which actually I didn't quote in when you're looking at the video component, right? Which states that if there's a lot of something, you need a lot of something to differentiate it, right? So essentially, we can hear the lower frequency component, right? So if you want to hear lower frequency component and you want to see the differences, you have to actually send lots of lower frequency components, lower frequency information for you to hear the differences. Then you can do on the higher frequency. What that means is for the speech. So if you want to send the audio in all the frequencies, right? You can hear a lot of the lower frequency, which means that I actually have to send you a lot more information on the lower frequency for you to notice the differences than on the higher end. Does that make sense? You can't really hear much of the high frequency. You can't hear the treble really, right? But I don't have to send you a lot of information on the high frequency for you to notice a difference. You can hear a lot more of the lower frequency. That also means I need to send you a lot more information in the lower frequency for you to tell the differences. Otherwise, you'll hear it all kind of merged together, right? So MP3 actually does this. MP3 is actually tuned on the lower frequencies. MP3 kills the treble component, right? But you can't really tell that because you don't have to send too much of that to actually make a difference. So you can actually send a little bit of it, it should still be fine. Right? But if you look at the range that they're working on, it sends very little of the high frequency, very little of the treble component, right? How many of you are into like music and who look into this as a hobby thing? Okay, so if you ever look into these things, so if you have an iPod or something, right? If you look at so one of the ways that iPod gets good quality is it gets rid of the high frequency components, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear them, right? So one of the things that Chris made a comment before the beginning of the class, right? Which is the best. People argue that the best audio comes from your record player, right? Your record player still has the best audio, right? But the counter argument is probably, but you just can't hear the difference, right? Yes, it's true that the record player probably has the range of audio, but most human beings can't hear it, or most human beings who are hearing the sounds through speakers, which are not good enough for you to hear the difference anyway. So you can't tell the difference, right? And that's the argument we'll see later for the high quality audio like DVD audio and stuff like that, right? And that's the argument why people buy iPods at all, right? iPod is lower quality than CD, but it's good enough.
Oh, they're starting to have like HD radio and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just a higher sampling frequency?
No, okay, so how many of you know that there's a digital audio being broadcasted? I think there's one station in South Bend, right? How many of you actually have receivers which can receive that? So there's broadcasting these things, right? So if you buy a new audio, they have this HD audio, right? So I forget which channel in South Bend broadcast that. There's a lot more in Chicago, right? They're broadcasting it as HD. I don't believe it's technically it's really HD, right? It's in digital, right?
Or they call it HD.
They call it HD, right? I'm saying it's digital format. So I haven't heard one, but I don't really believe it's higher definition than what you can get with audio. The radio stations love it because being digital, they can actually compress and send a lot more. I mean, for the same channel, they can probably send 2 bands to you, like 2 different channels to you. And they can both sound good, right? But when I look at the specs, I can't really say that they will sound better, more information, right? Yes?
So is EHD just a marketing tool?
No, I think technically you could. You could use better compression, right, and actually send you higher definition audio. But I just don't trust these guys, right? So,
Because like they in Detroit, they were all professing it, you know, like all the radio stations about a year ago started saying, oh, we're broadcasting on HD radio.
so technically it may be true that in HD radio, for the same channel width, so if you have a FM channel, the same width, I can technically compress the audio and send it to you in much higher quality within the same band, right? And if you happen to be at a location where you're getting good signals, then it'll make difference to you. Right? But practically, I'm not really convinced that that's what they're trying to do. But it's still HD.
Well, another problem with digital radio is that as you get farther away, you suddenly lose the signal altogether.
So that doesn't have to happen, but that's what will happen. Right? So if you one of the things with the with the digital, either with your cell phone or with your radio or TV, right? If you go further away, if the signal to noise ratio is so high that you can't put anything back together, right? You'll see a black screen on your digital TV, or you'll see blank noise, right? How many of you actually had a cell phone which is in the analog world? If you had an analog phone, right, analog cell phone, when the signal gets not bad, you hear the hiss, but you still hear something, right? You can yell through it, you can make some sense out of it. The digital thing will just cut off, right? Because you just can't make it. Right? Yeah, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? In digital, actually, they can send you a lot more, like send information twice over, right? So you can still get something even if you go further. But of course, they don't do that because they would rather send 2 channels rather than one good quality stuff, right? And that's one of the reasons why I don't really trust them. Right? So actually, FM can actually send more information than your CDs, right? Right? FM quality is potentially better than your CD, right? FM can actually send you when you talk about the real analog FM, if you play a record player, it can send you the record player information on the FM, right?
Except most of the radio stations are using CDs, so.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, right? Like, so your FM station, if they broadcast from a record player, they can actually produce better quality. But they all use, and many of them started to use CDs, right? So if they use CD, then it doesn't make a difference, right? There are other stuff too. So if you talk about the analog side of it, right? It's true that the record players actually have more information than your CDs, right? But it's also true that you need to have a good receiver, right? A good receiver costs you around 10 grand, right? For a record player, right? Most of people don't really have that kind of receivers, right? Most of them have a needle thing sticking and then trying to get the information out. So for practical purposes, your record player may not actually produce better quality sound. Right? So so how many of you have seen the record player? I have to say that because some of you may have never seen it, right? But that thing has a control which says 33, 45, something at a rate that rotates, right?
Wow.
So if you want good quality sound, that has to rotate at the exact frequency, the speed that you're talking about, and that's not cheap, right? And it cannot make warp like this. I mean, it has to stay perfectly flat, right? So even if the record is perfectly flat, the rotation has to be perfectly synchronized. And those things don't come cheap. And I think I was telling him, right? A good CD player, right? A good CD transport costs around $10,000, right? But the CD transport is basically just the rotating thing. It's not actually doing any pre-processing, right? A good motor which will keep the CDs rotating at the exact speed and exact without the flutter is pretty expensive, right? What do you think of that? When I said that, he actually had a comment to it.
$10,000 for a professional?
No,
Really?
pro consumer model.
Because
For a CD player?
Yes. No, CD transport, not like
yeah, that just doesn't seem right, because it seems like you just put like a simple PID controller onto a DC motor and have it.
So
run.
you have to make this motor like the base pretty heavy, right? Because otherwise, like, so if you keep your consumer grade CD, the rotating thing is not that heavy, right? You have to make it really heavy, because then the slight variations won't cause any differences, right? So the motor has to exactly rotate at the same speed, and you avoid it by having these heavier spinning things. And you need to be able to control it. So any change in the voltage on the household thing should not affect these things, right?
So you just get a good regulator and a good.
And those things cost, right? So the point is the cheap CDs that you get may not have the level of control that you can get with the more expensive ones, right? So I'm not saying that it's a linear function. I'm not saying that a $10 CD and a $10,000 CD are linearly different, but the small differences are there and make a difference. So my point is, when you say the records have a lot more information, sure they do, but you need to have ways to get the information out, right? So if you can't compare a $1,000 CD and a $100 record player and expect certain kind of quality of sound, right? So when I said the thing about CD, right? CD is a digital format, which means that you can have error correction and stuff, right? So I think, I don't know if you mentioned it, but like, so the question is, why do you have to be that accurate, right? So if you talk to anybody about digital format, they say CDs can have error correction, right? So they should be able to correct those errors. So if you actually are not spelling in the right fashion, it should be correctable by software, right? So why would you want to have something which is that accurate? Yeah.
I guess just from a DJ background, you want to constantly be controlling the speed of the disc to match it with another song.
Oh,
Control the speed.
okay. I'm not even getting to
okay.
to that aspect of it. Right? So, yeah, I mean that's a
Alright.
different issue, right? So I'm saying within the same thing, right? So why does it have to be that accurate, right? So if it's digital, they should be able to correct any errors, right? And that's one of the reasons why they sell you the digital cell phones too, right? Digital, you should be able to correct all these things, so you should not see. So unless you go to the extremes, if you go to the extreme digital cell phone, you'll hear nothing, right? But if you're not that far up, digital should sound clearer than the analog, right? That's if you haven't heard it, that's maybe because you guys have passed the generation where there was actually a choice, right? That you can either get an analog or digital. And they used to say, if you go digital, you can actually get clearer sound anywhere, right? Is that true?
You can get clearer sound, but anywhere is smaller now, particularly with transmissions.
Say it again.
With analog audio, the area you can reach is larger with the same signal strength. But
So ignore that part, right? So assume no, that's true, because that's a different point. So what point I'm making is, if you have a transmitter there, and I'm constant distance from the transmitter, right? And the argument is analog would give you better quality sound, or analog will be worse than digital, right? The point you're making is, yes, if you're going too far out, digital would be horrible, right? So let's go the other way, where you're closer to the station, and analog you can still hear noise, and digital you can correct them, right? And the implication is digital is better quality than analog, right? So I'm saying, is that true? Actually, it is true, right? But what's the catch here?
It's more consistent quality, but you've got an upper limit on how high quality it can get.
Yeah, that's one component of it. The component I was trying to get at was, it's true that digital you don't see the noise, but when you hear for some reason that you lose some signal, right? Digital, it kind of patches everything with error correction, right? So depending on how much extra data you send, you can do good error correction. Otherwise, you'll patch it up so you won't see the difference, right? Which doesn't mean that you get better quality, right? For example, if you're looking at the digital TV, if the signal quality is not good, you can kind of make it smooth. You'll see a smoother picture, right? You don't see as much detail. Whereas in analog, you see lots of the dots and snow effect, right? But they're both the same. So depending on unless you send extra information, right? If you have the same amount of error information, a digital picture will look washed out, and an analog picture will look all grainy. But there's not much any more different information in both of those. They managed to confuse people or make it clear. In a digital picture, it'll look clearer, but with less detail. In an analog picture, you'll have a lot more snow, but through the snow, you can probably see more quality, right? What really matters is not whether it's analog or digital. What really matters is how much extra information you send, and that's one of the reasons why I'm skeptical of these HD DVD, HD radio. It's actually digital audio, right? It is possible for them to send extra bits such that you could still get higher quality, right? They could send twice the amount of information compressed, so even if you lose some of the bits, you can still recover the quality back. But what they usually end up doing is sending you just not enough error information, so you tend to lose the quality, right? You won't hear the hiss, but you won't hear the none of them relates to this class, but they're most of what these guys do as DVD and whatever. Actually, I don't have a player which can play the HD, so I was hoping that one of you can look at it. Right? How many of you have like Sirius or XM satellite radio? Okay.
Poor college students.
Yeah.
Not our fault.
Part one of the bias one?
What?
Has it.
It's actually.
And
Okay.
also one of has one.
What?
Dave Salyers has one.
So have you heard the difference?
Yeah.
You think they're better quality?
I don't think it's worth $50 a month.
For-
$50 a month.
Something ridiculous.
No, it's like 15.
Yeah.
What?
It's like 10 or 15.
I think the base
I think
is
it's
basic
still
is like
11, it's not that bad.
Yeah, it's
still
like 10 or
money
15.
per month
But
to pay.
you know, the other thing you have to realize is
Money
car
either way.
speakers
It's like
are
that.
usually very bad.
It's like cable.
Car audio speakers are usually paper cones. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the other thing is a lot of the people who are listening to satellite radio don't have it hardwired in. They're using these FM converters to listen to satellite radio. So, you know, is it better quality? I mean,
so let's like the best case, right? Ignore all those. Like so you have
best case, you've got good speakers, you've got a hardwire connection. It depends how good your FM signal is, too, though.
Mhm.
If you have a good FM signal versus a good satellite radio signal, I don't know what I think is better.
No, actually, good FM signal would be better. If you
Yeah.
look at the bandwidth of how much they send out, right?
Yeah.
No, forget about good FM. Normal FM has much higher information than your satellite.
Yeah.
A satellite, they aggressively compress it, right?
Yeah.
They compress as much as possible because I think they only have like 19 megahertz range for the whole satellite signal, right? And they add like channels left and right? They have like 120 or so channels, right? So adding more channels means that they're getting they're using better compression, not changing the satellite window, right? Because that's defined by FCC.
But they also do play tricks depending upon are you listening to music or is it a talk station?
Because there's
or-
something more compression, right? So if they know that
But,
your
but they
audio,
can, I'm saying they can be compression specific
Yes.
to the type of music.
Yes.
So they can say, all right, this is classical music, we're going to give it more space.
But
Or
they
this
don't,
is
but
talk
they don't, they
radio.
do.
they could, but they don't. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that most people that buy satellite radio is not because of the quality. It's more because you can have 120 channels of music without commercial free,
Mhm.
and you can like. I remember this. My cousin had one, and you can actually have a seeker, so you put your favorite songs, like 10 favorite songs, and it'll keep seeking out on all the radios till he finds it. So whenever your favorite song is on, it'll tell you, look, on this channel your song is on. You can switch right at that
Oh,
moment
yeah.
and hear your favorite song. It's that kind of
Because
thing.
it's digital, right?
Yeah.
because you can send the information about what song it is, and you can.
Yeah, so there's a secret in checking out every single song in every single channel. Whenever your song comes on, it tells you. So you can just switch and listen.
Okay.
Plus, you can listen to uncensored things.
Do you listen to Howard Stern?
So I don't have it, but I mean, you know.
If you did have it, that's what you'd be listening to?
No.
So
That's
But
probably
then I
one of the
imagine
reasons
that
a lot
that's
of
a
people do.
that's
Yeah.
a motivating.
So I only listened to XM once, right, on a rental car, and yeah, sure enough, like it's on a rap song. I was like, I never heard that song before. That's like completely different than anything you hear, right? Yeah, it's not broadcast stuff, right? Yeah, but the quality is no different, right? But technically they could give you better quality, right? Technically XM can give you all 90 megahertz to one channel if they wanted, right? So technically they can advertise that we have higher quality than anything that you can throw at it. But if you take that technicality, then you can only have 4 or 5 channels, right? Which no one really wants, right? So,
I still don't see why you need 120, but.
yeah. But so you also get that to the satellite TV, right? So you have like different variants of the stuff, right? So you no longer have to have like rap, right? You can have rap country, like different variants of the stuff, right? So you can have within 120 certain number of songs which are tuned to a particular audience, right? So that's
We're lazy.
right?
We're lazy.
Apparently people like it, right? But you have, yeah, the rental car one didn't have that kind of feature, but yeah, you can imagine it kind of figuring out what. So you'll keep playing the same song in different channels. Is that what it
No,
is?
it's like you put like your 10 favorite songs you like listening to, and whenever your radio's on, it'll keep seeking those songs out. And whenever one station of 120 has it, it'll tell you station 25 has your song on at this time, so you can switch and listen to it.
But why would
Couldn't you do that with the FM?
I'm just telling you the features it has. I don't have satellite radio.
like what?
Use $15 a month and buy a different CD.
Right? Like have memory, right? Like have like some hard disk or something inside.
That's what some of them are starting to do, actually. Some of them will record your song onto the unit,
Like a TiVo.
kind of like a TiVo.
How is that
Yeah.
legal?
That's illegal according to the RAA.
No, because there's no way
Why?
to export it. They claim that it's legal because you cannot get
Oh,
the
you
song
can't
off of
export
the
it to
device.
the-
Like you cannot get
Actually.
the song off the device. So
I'm sure there's a way to
supposedly-
hack it.
Well,
Right?
you know,
If you do that, right?
Yeah.
Like you pointed out, like if you have 10 songs and you program into it, you can download everything, put it into some memory, and then it essentially becomes like a
CD.
C5 parts kind of thing, right? But I guess like this is a CD that you keep paying $10 or $15 a month, so it's a,
you can hook it up to you can hook all these units up to your computer and rip MP3s straight off the songs.
So I'm not touching the whole notion of DRM because that's a black hole, right? Because like they come up with innovative ways to destroy a good thing. But yeah, I have problem with checking. If I have time, I was gonna say it at the end in terms of what I have with these guys, right? Because I actually have a good stereo at home, but I can't get any good quality content because they just don't want to give it to you unless you go through these hoops, which I'm willing to jump through, but they just make it that much harder for me to jump through, right? And I just can't keep up with them. So, in terms of the compression, you have the PCM, which essentially is a pulse code modulated code, which essentially signals, digitizes your audio, and you have differential, which actually figures out what has changed since the last time extent, right? And adaptive kind of thing. These are lossless coding formats, and then they give you certain amount of compression, right? These things don't use your audio any input, so you can actually use a PCM compression for any signal at that frequencies, and it'll still give you good compression, right? It's not specific to audio. And in terms of how they play, I think actually the chapter 6 talks about how you can play them, in terms of a sound card, right? You can play them as FM modulator, which essentially plays the whole, it generates the audio that you wanted. If you do a wave table, you create a table of the different of the different components that you wanted, then it plays it. So if it has a guitar, in the card, right? It can change the signal from what it has, right? And this is where, if you're an artist, then it comes in what it actually does. I don't understand what it does, but essentially, it keeps a guitar and then it changes it to get the song you wanted. And the MIDI interface is essentially, it creates the so it can say, now play the piano and play, for this length or whatever. So you actually have to have a MIDI device or a thing which understands this stuff, right? So if you use GarageBand, you can see some of this stuff. So maybe if you actually look at the GarageBand when you're doing the homework project. So if you did, you can actually add these things, right?
Oh, really?
So you have one of these things they can add the different right, it's that whatever that
Are they clicking it?
so this music box is the particular instrument, and then you can create the
On the group.
It's cool.
play with GarageBand, right? So essentially you can create the music instrument that you wanted, and then when you play on the keyboard, on the screen, the particular instrument, right? You can actually hook it up to a MIDI piano, right? So when you press the keys, it essentially senses something to the software, and the MIDI decoder is in the software, but you would actually have to connect. I'm getting so many mails. Right? So you hook up to the ISR speakers and you hear the sound, right? So when you play this, when you record this stuff, all you have to record is grand piano, key 1, 2, for how much duration, right? You don't have to record anything else. And on the other end, you have to know what a grand piano is, what this thing means, and you just play it. So you are recreating these songs. So sort of like the MPEG-4 kind of thing. You're creating an object. You're sending, instead of a sound, you're sending, this is the instrument, play this thing for a certain part. I think actually you can create a human voice too. You can remember what the voice is and then replay that voice on the other end, right? So now you don't have to send the whole thing. You basically say, use male voice, and then speak this particular text. If you're into music and if you're a DJ, you probably know the MIDI interface, right?
No, I don't use MIDI.
But you know what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So all of them depends on how much complexity is up at the creation and how much complexity is on the sort of the speaker, right? So in terms of the FM modulator, all the complexity is up in the software, and the speaker gets everything, right? Which means that if you're sending the signal, you send a lot more signals. Whereas if you go to MIDI, right, all the complexity is up at the speaker end. So I can send very few signals and then you'll play it. So I can say, play the grand piano, don't have to send the whole actual sound. And those define the sort of compression you can get. And then you can see the similarities with in terms of the video content. Right? I can send an object, or I can send the whole rendered video scenes. And there are other coding techniques which are specific to what the human ear can hear. And actually, the second chapter in the book goes through a lot of details of that. Right? I suggest that you just browse through them unless you're interested in dealing with those. But essentially, they do different kinds of ways to get compression. So one of the interesting stuff I thought was the format voice-only coder, right? So the intuition here is human voice is not equally spread out within the 100 to 400 hertz, which is where the audio stuff is, right? There are only certain things that the voice cards can make. So if you do a compression where you only compress those frequencies, right, then you can apparently get one kbps for voice, right? Your telephone uses 4 kilobits per second worth of signal, right? So this is actually 1/4 your telephone, and you still get good signal. So if you're doing audio chat, if you use this kind of a mechanism, right, you'll still hear on the other end what the person is saying, right? It may not have the same feel or quality, but you'll still be able to understand, because that's all human beings talk anyway. That's all you can hear, right? So the book talks about a whole bunch of these little tweaks you can do, where the goal is to reduce the bit rate as much as possible. So if you're doing audio chat, right, 1000 dps is sort of like your, you can do a dial-up over your cell phone, right, at that rate. You can still hear what the other person is saying. So I'm not going to go into the details of many of those, right? What I'm going to talk about a little bit about is the different MPEG layers. So you've probably heard of MP3s, which are essentially MPEG 1 layer 3. So MPEG 1 defines 3 different layers of compression, right? And each layer requires slightly higher bit rates, and they all use the notion that the human hearing system that we kind of mentioned, right? So MPEG layer 3 uses a lot more of the human ear system, and it gets a lot more compression, but it also has to do a lot more coding upfront. And if you go over here, you do less compression upfront. All 3 of them, the good thing is the decoder it's simple. So that's why you can actually buy an MP3 player for pretty cheap, because the decoder doesn't have to do much work. The encoder is the one which has to do a lot more work. And layer 3 does a lot more of this, like one. So layer 3, like for example, does variable the critical band that I talked about before, right? So for example, you cannot tell the difference between 100 hertz at the lower frequency, but up to 6,000 at the higher frequency. So at the higher frequency, essentially, like one of them I gave is 6,000, right? So it knows that if there's a lot of variation from say 15,000 to 20,000, it doesn't have to send any of those because you can't hear it anyway, right? So MP3 uses a lot more of those, right? There are other formats which are out there. Look at the Wikipedia if you want to go into details of those. So one of them was the DVD audio, right? Which actually, so CD quality is 44.1 kilohertz frequency. But if you do, so that's, it's got kind of pushed away, right? So this comes here. And CD quality is 16-bit audio. Whereas in the DVD audio, you can actually have higher fidelity, more information, and more depth in each of the information, right? And there's also the SA-CD, Super Audio CD, which has more, which can potentially do much higher quality. Yes.
That sampling rate for the Super Audio CD, I just don't see why you need that much. I mean, the human hearing cuts out like around 40 kilohertz.
Okay.
So you only need.
No. This is the rate at which it.
Yeah, I know, and usually you don't need more than like.
You can actually hear the difference on good speakers. I
Yes.
never
Well,
believed
even-
that you could, but now
You
that
can.
I've actually heard them, you can.
But usually the sampling frequency you take is the maximum frequency times about 10 for. really
All I
good
can tell you is I never believed it. My uncle, this is his life, his hobby, and you can hear the difference.
So one of the good things and bad things about being married is I can't just go and buy this. I can't say like this speaker which is like $7,000 for one is so awesome, right? So I had to convince my wife, right? And she's like, no, I don't believe this stuff, right? No, you can feel, you can tell the difference. You can tell the difference between this and this, not for all content. It all depends on the source, right? So how they recorded this depends on what they do, right? So there are 2 things. One is you may have some classics that you heard all your life that you really wanted in the SA-CD format, right? But the problem is that the original for those may not be good enough. So you have to make sure that the original recording had enough information that can go into this stuff, right? And the other stuff is consumer CDs. They know that you're going to play it off of your cheap car stereo or something, not on like pretty expensive stuff. So they do all kinds of stuff to make it sound good, right? So you need to have some source before then which was not polluted by all this stuff, right? The other thing you notice is you can actually hear this thing really good in a good speaker. You can actually hear even the CD as like pretty good, but what you hear is pretty good may not be what you really wanted, right? So one of the things like like if any of you wants to come to my house and you're free to look at this sound, right? Unfortunately, we have little child, so all of them are kind of like blocked up, right? See, one of the things you notice is if it's a really good stereo, you can actually hear the person like breathing, right? Even on a CD thing. A lot of people don't like that, right? Because it turns out that most singers breathe, right? But you're not used to that thing, right? You're used to not hearing those things. So suddenly you're like, but
don't breathe.
no, I mean like, it's wrong because I know this artist is like singing, not like singing and then breathing, right? And you're laughing, but when you hear the stuff, you're like, no, that's so cool because you actually prefer to go back to the one that you grew up listening on, the one you're used to, right? So yeah, you're free to come over and look at this stuff, but the first thing you notice is I don't like this song because it's a different song, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Did you convince your wife?
Yeah.
You didn't finish. Okay.
We did, so we bought the stuff, right?
Just curious.
So the one I liked was like 50 grand, so we didn't go that far.
What did they, with all the talk with the Blu-ray and the HD DVD, are they upping the audio quality at all?
Not really.
And they're keeping it the same as DVD audio?
They do True HD. They do have a different codec. So this is the medium, right? And the way you store it is either the Dolby Digital, AC3, or DTS, right? DTS is the movie theater thing, right? If you go to the movie theater, you'll probably see the DTS sign, right? So they actually have a higher fidelity for the potentially for the Blu-ray too. I think one of them is called True HD, one of them is called DVD, DTS, or whatever, right? And they also have more. I think the Blu-ray can actually do DTS 7.1, 7 speaker plus 1 around, right? I only have 5 speakers, and I just don't, actually, the surround is for my wife, right? I only prefer the front 2 speakers, but.
Why is it 5.1?
Subwoofer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what do they call it? NLE, separate the subwoofer separately. Yeah, no, you could do it, but.
The other thing listening to my uncle talk is that content providers don't really care about providing it any higher than SACD because the number of people who would actually be interested in it are so small, which means if you want it, you would have to somehow be producing your own content, like off the record or something like that. And to produce something that can sample something digitally at a rate higher than SACD is just impossible.
Yeah, but I actually can't hear the difference between SACD and this.
I'm just telling you, he claims to be able to hear the difference. I don't think I can.
Yeah, I can't tell the difference between these two. But even the CD, right? It's amazing how much you can hear in a CD, right? If any of you have a CD that you want to check out, in my house, you can hear a whole bunch of information in the CD that you never knew existed, right? So yes, SACD actually I don't have the SACD player because I didn't have the money to buy them, right? So one of the things you also notice is you could actually buy a SACD for $100 or $50 or something right now, right? SACD or DVD audio, right? So if you look at the DVD players, they also have this thing on how far they can go, right? What's the digital content that they can spit out, right? The more expensive ones can actually spit out more. So if you get the cheaper one can play DVD audio at this rate, right? So technically it's playing the DVD audio, but practically it's playing no more than CD quality, right? So you need to have a good converter which can go far. I think I can go up to 128, right? My converter doesn't go all the way there, right? So you can buy a cheaper one, which means that you can play it but not really hear it, right? You can see that the annoying things that's being added if you listen to any of the Indian CDs, Indian CDs sound horrible in my speaker. Like, 'cause my mother, like, she listens to the thing and she's like, just turn it off, because they change the sound to sound really good on like $5 speaker, and you hear it, you're like, it's some kind of noise, right? And in terms of there's two kinds of, so there are other things you need to worry about, right? The other thing you need to worry about is the cabling. How does it go from your CD to the different components? And one of the higher quality components are the SPDI, which is either the RCA cable or optical. Like, actually, I think the RCA cable is better quality than optical, right? And the cables are pretty expensive from your stereo to wherever you send it, right? So I think my speaker cable is like $1,000 for the front speakers, right? Because again, you want to make sure that it's all fully shielded, right? You actually hear a difference, because if it's not shielded, when you touch it or when you go near it, you hear the.
Do you have the flat speaker cable too?
Hmm?
Do they flatten it so it's like ribbon cable?
No, it's actually this big.
Wait, that big?
Yeah. So.
I guess you really like listening to music.
Yeah. Unfortunately, now you have kids, so everything is kind of like hidden behind it. So that's one of the reasons why, like, they have the shielded here, and if you really like music, you think this is like the worst thing you can do, right? Because they have the video cable, audio cable, and the power cable here, right? Going through this thing inside the shield, right? So they're shielding it from being like, from you guys ripping it apart or whatever, right? From audio quality perspective, this is the worst thing, right? Because 50 hertz, you may be able to hear it. You should be able to hear it in the subwoofer range, right? So 50 hertz is your power cable, right? So when you keep the power cable and the audio cable so close together, right, you're going to hear a constant 50 hertz hum, right? So you definitely don't want to do something like this, right? But anyway, so they do make a difference, but I'm not saying it's all linear, right? So, like, in terms of systems stuff, right? There'll be one paper we talk about where all these things make sense. You know, the symphony case, right? Because you expect the people who are either going to a symphony or playing the symphony to be able to tell all these differences, right? They don't probably want to hear you fix the sound by using equalizers and other things to mess it up, but so that's kind of what I had. Like, you know, it's more of, if you think about it, it's similar to what we had in the video sense.
No.
In the video sense, but depending on you know, it's slightly different, because you know we hear different frequencies differently, and there's the effects of, you can hear certain frequencies and not certain frequencies in conjunctions, and use that to get better compression, right? Similar to what you had with the object-based encoding, you can send object-based stuff, and that'll make a difference. I think the MPEG 4 audio, you can actually send something which says that the speaker is talking in English or American English profile. Then the decoder can use that to change the sound to look or feel good, right? I don't know how that works, but so you can send the profile of what is being talked about, not just whether it's music or audio, but it's a male North American accent, so they can make it sound good for that particular profile, right? But the thing to remember is, audio is a lot smaller than video, except you do notice it. Right? If you're watching a movie or something, if you're in video conference, if you don't see me, or if something kind of goes away for a second, you're okay. But if you see any drops or anything in the audio, you do notice it. If there's any quantization error in the audio, you do notice it. So you want to make sure that audio is always there on time, right? But there are some things that you don't actually notice, and that's the stuff that I had, which is trivia, right? Which I find interesting. You see this all over the place, and this is like a couple of them, right? The last one is this, right? I'm going to start with this, right? So TV programs that you watch, right? You see programs and then the reruns, right? They all have different levels of commercials and stuff, right? And if you watch things like Friends and stuff, over a long time, they have a lot more advertisements. And the first time when they run the program, nobody's watching, and they're trying to get people to watch them. So they have far fewer advertisements, right? Have you noticed that they all play at the same time? Like a half an hour program, like when the beginning of the season, it doesn't start out with 45-minute or right? And then the start of advertisements, you still play in half an hour, right? And very few of them actually chop off anything. Where they maybe chop off the credits and stuff, but the program actually plays the same time, right? Ever wondered what happened? So they actually changed the pitch. I think they can change, I forget what the number is, right? So somebody was mentioning it. They can actually change the pitch up to some percentage, right? They especially do that when you get some interruption for some local interruption, right? So you're watching a game or something and then there's a local interruption, then they record it and play it back afterwards, right? And they try to catch up, right? So they don't take as much time as the live content would have taken, right? If you notice it, that will happen. So if you have some broadcast, a local thing preempts it, right? When they bring it back, they'll catch up pretty quickly, right? The way they do that is they play it slightly faster. I think I swear it could be 10%. I couldn't find it on the net, right? So they change the pitch. If it's up to 10%, you can't tell the difference unless you're hearing both at the same time. So if you hear me speaking right now and then you see me speaking a little faster right next to me, you can tell the difference. But if you change it all the while, you can't tell the difference. So if there are a lot of advertisements, it's actually a little whinier than what it was before, right? So one of the things is your friends may actually be whinier because it's actually talking faster, right? But you can't tell the difference, right? And actually, so next time when you see your favorite game being pushed later, right, and then you watch the game, you're actually watching the game a little faster, right? But it's not fast enough that you notice it. If you do like this, then you notice it, right? But so you can change it in your GarageBand. Put an audio into GarageBand, and then you can change the beat rate or something, right? And I think it starts at 120. You can change it, go up and down, right? If you go from 120 to 400, it will you hear the VCRs fast forwarding, right? But if you change it slightly, whatever, right? You can if you hear it go from 120 to 130, you can tell the difference, right? But change to 130 and then ask your friend to come up and listen to the stuff, right? They can't tell the difference. Okay. I think it's kind of interesting. This is an aspect we don't actually do it here, but you will notice if you keep changing it, right? So if you have it from a system's perspective, if you don't get the right number of packets, you can compress it and then decompress it, but you have to do it slowly, right? If you do it quite fast, then you notice it. But if you do it slowly, where for a while I'm kind of talking normal pace, and then I'm talking kind of fast, like you can catch up, and then kind of go slowly, then you won't notice the difference.
And you can bring down the pitch of the voice so people don't speak in higher voices, even though you compressed it. So it wouldn't actually sound whinier, it would just be more rapid.
Okay. Yeah, so they do all kind of stuff, but essentially it's not the way that. But it has to be synchronized. If it's not synchronized, then you notice it, right? If I'm talking and the sound is not together, then you notice it. Right? The other two I find kind of the stuff about